generative possibilities. This is the alchemy. The whole alchemy, the whole reason for the sacred secretion is this alchemical process that creates regenerativeness within the body-mind-spirit complex. So there's an embodiment going on, and that's reflected in the physiological activations that are being produced through this regenerative process. Now, when we outsource consciousness and we begin to outsource all of these different internal occult anatomy functions, that's when we start creating degenerative circumstances, or what I call calcification, the force in nature that calcifies. When we're consciously participating in this whole process, this is the human potential, the human capacity. This is one method of activating the highest potential and exalting the highest consciousness within the human form. Now, one would naturally ask, how do we raise 1/10 of this generative seed all the way to our optic thalamus to activate these dormant nerves and reawaken different pathways inside our skull and cerebrum? This is done through deliberate and conscious acts that are of a higher vibratory nature. Now, when I'm talking about a high vibratory nature versus low vibratory nature, there's certain things that they fall under the category that are during this period where we're trying to consciously raise the sacred secretion back up into our skull. There's eating healthy food. There's meditating. There's practicing compassion or just seeing another person's perspective. There's just certain acts of self-love or love of other that we're able to do to heighten our vibration. And that this is just pretty much across the board. No one's going to really argue that that's high vibrational versus low vibrational. That's eating poor quality foods. That's consuming poor quality content, whatever that might be for you. There's just, different things that are straight up bad vibes. And so in this period of time when we're raising the generative seed back up into the skull, we're looking for the highest vibratory way of existing inside our environment. So if we're doing things from a gluttonous nature, then that's not going to be high vibrational, unless we're eating 10 grape leaves for snake meal. But if we're able to, in order to exalt it and in order to participate in our own evolution. So this is a very strong method to be able to create our art and use our inner alchemy for that higher purpose of embodying our higher self. The sacred secretion begins every lunar cycle when the moon is in our sun sign. For optimal results, it is best to start these high vibrational practices 2 days before the moon enters your sun sign, and then to continue the practice for 2 days after the moon exits your sun sign. When we are raising the oil or seed back up the vagus nerve, it reaches the base of the skull. It remains there for 2.5 days, which is the amount of time that the moon is in a sign, before it continues its ascent up to the optic thalamus. When the oil is at the base of the skull, it is crucified. But to crucify the substance does not mean it is annihilated. In fact, the very opposite. To crucify means to increase in power 1,000-fold, which is done in a process similar to immersing this substance in the information field of the cranial nerves, the connective center between the brain and the spine, so as to fix it. This entire process is encoded again and again in the stages of alchemy. Now it stays at the base of the skull, otherwise known as the crucifixion place, Calvary. Calvary means crucifixion. Why does it stay at the base of the skull for 3 days? Why did the Jesus narrative have Jesus dead for 3 days until he rose again? Because to crucify is to fix. We are fixing the oil here. And by fixing, I don't mean it's broken and we need to repair it. Fixing in alchemical terminology is replying to the 4 different natures of our zodiac. It is materializing, even for means when we're talking about it through spiritual alchemy and through an esoteric understanding. So right here, it's staying there to become fixed. And then it makes its way back up until it hits the optic thalamus. When the seed hits the optic thalamus, this is when the Christ oil has now become anointed. So this stage would represent the successful completion of that cycle of the sacred secretion. So this stage that is marked by the anointed would be the successful completion of this cycle of the sacred secretion, which happens every 29.5 days, every moon cycle. So we have 12 opportunities within a year to participate in this process that's already happening by default within our body. But when we consciously participate into it, it becomes the sacred secretion. Now, even though there are subjective ways that we interpret high vibrational activity and low vibrational activity during this period, what's very crucial to mention is that one of the things that needs to be done during this 7-day period is the tongue. The tip of the tongue needs to be on the roof of the mouth, because I cannot stress this enough. If the tip of the tongue is not fixed to the roof of the mouth, like that, then this whole circuitry has a very difficult time activating. And this is the circuitry that is going to help activate the cranial nerves. Mysticism even says a 13th cranial nerve can grow out of this act that I'm just talking about. You have to close that circuit, that whole circuit. And how we awaken those nerves, how we produce and direct the seed to be able to come up, is through the tip of the tongue being placed at the roof of the mouth. Without that process, we are not consciously participating in this whole raising. It would be very hard to just do things of a higher vibrational nature